Hi everyone, it's Ellen March and this is So What with Sulky. I hope you all had a great holiday weekend. It was a little bit crazy for me, I must admit, because we've got fires going on here in Colorado, and so we went from raining ash to raining snow literally overnight, and it has been crazy. So if any of you are also experiencing those fires, my thoughts are with you, and I hope that you're staying safe. And for all of you also enjoying snow this morning, congratulations. Let's enjoy it. All right, so today we are talking about Sergers. And I know a lot of you have been asking about Serger content for a while now. And we have some Serger projects up on the Sulky blog at blog.sulky.com. You can search for Serger projects. There is some Serger information, needles to use, threads to use, that type of thing. But today and this afternoon, we will be diving in deep to Serger education. So I hope you are able to join us today at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock Eastern time is our webinar. Keep in mind, if you are in a different time zone, to adjust accordingly. Sometimes people call in late to the webinar and they miss the beginning and need to start over, which is also fine, because if you are unable to join us live, all of our webinars are available on demand as soon as the live event ends. So you can watch it at any time at your leisure. You can watch it over and over again if there's a part that you missed, that type of thing. So they are always available to you, and just like these Facebook Lives. So I also wanted to reiterate that the Facebook Live, what we're doing right now, is different from the webinar that we will be doing at 2 o'clock. So our Facebook Live is where we get to come together as a community, ask questions about things that we're sewing, talk about Sulky products, projects that you have in the works, and it's my special chance to give you some sneak peeks for new product releases, things that are coming up, and it's a great time. So thanks for joining me today. I have Katrina Walker with me, who will be joining for today's webinar. Excuse me just one moment. Sorry about that. Katrina is here, and I will be bringing her on in just a second. So get your questions ready for Katrina. Katrina Walker is a sewing expert. I've known her, I think, my entire career for the past 15 years. That's nuts, 15 years. And we're both still just 21 years old, so that's amazing. But Katrina is a great friend of mine, and she is a wonderful teacher. You will absolutely feel at ease with her. She just really guides you through what you need to do to sew better, sew faster, sew with confidence, and that's what we are all about here at Sulky. So get your questions ready for Katrina, because she will be joining me in just a minute. I just want to go through a little bit more about the webinar today at 2 p.m. Again, 2 p.m. It is Serger Smarts and Fun with Filaine Thread. So not only are we going to learn about using our serger and how to use it more efficiently, more effectively for different kinds of projects, not just finishing seams, but we're also going to learn about how to work with Sulky Filaine thread. Katrina has had this thread for quite a while now. She might have been the first designer that we gave Filaine to play with and to experiment with. So she is really responsible for a lot of the education we have out there on Filaine. She really, really tested it and put it through the ringer and did a bunch of embroideries to showcase it and to learn how to use it. So she taught me a bunch of tips for when I was also experimenting with it. So who better to learn it from than Katrina? So I also want to go over today's giveaway. I posted it in today's description for the post today, and we are giving away a pack of Sulky Fuse and Stitch Stabilizer, to one of our lucky viewers who is liking, commenting, sharing, otherwise engaging with the post today. So Fuse and Stitch, that is one of Katrina's favorite stabilizers, and we are going to feature it in this afternoon's webinar. Not only can you use Fuse and Stitch as a stabilizer for embroidery, but Fuse and Stitch also makes a great heavyweight interfacing for things like bags. And that is what we are making for the webinar today. So Katrina designed this tote bag. It is featured in her book. This is a variation on the bag featuring that Fellaine embroidery that I was talking about. And when I bring Katrina on, we will discuss the book at greater depth so that you can hear all about it. But this is the Great Market Tote. It's a great size for toting all kinds of things. You could fit your laptop in here and a bunch of other stuff. Plus, it features really great high quality fabrics from Art Gallery Fabrics. I love me some Art Gallery Fabrics. All right, so this is one version of the tote that you can create when you watch today's webinar. It features these beautiful floral embroideries that are a Sulky exclusive, and I will explain that in just a moment. This is the inside of the tote, and like I said, it has this great Art Gallery fabric print. The denim colored fabrics on the outside are also Art Gallery, so it has this beautiful hand to it. You can definitely tell the difference between high quality fabrics and mediocre fabrics if just by touching them. So these really feel like butter, and they're just so beautiful, and the floral print inside is just, you know, a pop of happiness, I'm gonna say, because I'm cheesy like that. All right, this is another version of the tote you can create. This is the dandelion side, I'm gonna call it. This is also one of the embroidery designs that is available in our new exclusive pollen embroidery design collection. So I need to explain a few things about the collection, which we will be talking about in depth in today's webinar. The dandelion design is available with the purchase of the Market Tote Kit. Okay, you will get a download link for your dandelion design. I also want to mention Katrina added more fluff to this design using software. She just kind of selected a few of those little fluffies that are flying in the air and then repeated them to go across the whole upper edge of the tote, which is so pretty. So your design will not have all of that fluff. You would need to add it in software in order to get that look, but it's also a really cool design without it. So if you purchase the Market Tote Kit today for our 2 o'clock webinar, it is at a super deal, and it's already on sale. Sneak peek, already on sale for today for the webinar day only, okay? So the dandelion design comes with that kit. Also what we have available is a brand new slimline container that has all of the rayon colors that you need for the pollen collection, as well as all of the Fellaine colors that you need, all packaged together in a slimline. Now, the slimline comes with the whole collection, all 6 designs, which I will show you in just a minute. So I just wanted to make that clear. These are how you get the designs. It's a little confusing. So if you get the pollen slimline as well as the tote, you'll get the dandelion design essentially delivered to you twice electronically. That's just the way it works out. So I hope that makes sense. Also, the Fellaine that comes in the slimline, this is how we sell the Fellaine. It is how many yards are on this puppy? 435 yards, okay? Because when you're doing a fur or brush type embroidery design, you need a lot of thread. So we sell it like this. But with the pollen design, the amount of Fellaine that you're using for each flower, which I'll show you momentarily, is a lot less, okay? Because you're just using that thread for the pollen part of the flower. So we were able to wind smaller spools of the Fellaine and include it in the slimline so that they would fit nicely in the container with all of the rayon threads. So that is also an exclusive deal. You won't be able to get those smaller spools of phylane outside of this pollen collection. So I just wanted to explain a little bit of the confusing matters for today's webinar before I brought Katrina on. And for those of you unfamiliar with phylane, it is a 100% acrylic thread that has a fuzzy texture to it. I don't know if you can see that fuzziness, but because of that, you can brush those parts of your design, like you see in this picture here, with our phylane wire brush, and look what happens. It gets super fuzzy, and it looks like a fuzzy dandelion that you were blowing on your front lawn. It is so cool. I love it so much. And again, Katrina's going to explain a lot of tips for working with this thread because it can get a little finicky and you need to do some adjustments in order for your machine to accept it. So I wanted to show you those close-ups, but let's bring Katrina on. And I know there are a lot of questions that have been coming in. So first off, let me introduce Katrina Walker, and then we will address your questions momentarily. Hey, Katrina.
Good morning. Well, for people in Pacific Mountain Central.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being on with me today. I know we have a lot going on with the webinar a little bit later this afternoon, so I appreciate that you got up early and, well, as early as it is now. I've lost track of time these days. But thanks for joining me on today's So What? I want to make sure to start addressing your book. So let me bring up, it'll be a little bit easier if I bring up a picture of the book so that everyone can look at it, so I'm not moving it around so much. So this is what Katrina's book looks like, a field guide, Serger 101. So Katrina, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how this book sort of came to be? And while you're explaining that, I will look over some of the questions that people are already asking.
Awesome. Well, it's funny, I've been surging since junior high. I mean, in all seriousness, I probably had more stirrup pants than any other kid in my high school. But, it was never something that I ever expected to be writing a book about. But I was so thrilled when I was approached about it because I love to teach things that scare people. And there's something about Sergers that scares people. And so this is like right up my alley. I teach scary fabrics, scary threads and things. So, Sergers was perfect because for me, there's just no greater joy than taking something that, maybe people aren't so sure about or, don't feel confident with and have them say, walk out of my classroom or finish reading the book and be like, oh, I totally got this, so that was really exciting. So, but the big challenge, of course, the field guide series is something that C&T has come up with for a variety of topics. And of course, and the whole point is to truly be a field guide where the topic is broken down into, kind of digestible bits so like, for instance, for Serger 101, we start with actually just learning the serger. If I say, well, you need to adjust the upper looper, if you have no idea what on earth the upper looper is or what it looks like, you can't really go on with the education. So it starts with the bare bones of these are the parts of your serger. And then, okay, here's how those parts work and here's how we thread them. And then these are the stitches it creates. And then go on to, and here's how you take those stitches and here's how the techniques and skills you need to be able to stitch accurately using them. And here's how to adapt your patterns. And, we even go into construction, how to use flat construction methods to do a t-shirt and how to do a pair of knit pants. And the tote bag actually was part of a special section just for 5-thread sergers because 5-thread sergers, perform stitches that a traditional 4-thread serger cannot. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have a 5-thread serger by any means to do the project, but just to illustrate, so as you go through the book, there's projects associated with each step to help you practice your skills and learn. So I think that's extremely important. If you don't actually use it, and, it has to be things, hopefully they're projects that people find at least, fun to do, or semi-useful, or ways to enhance their life. Because if it's, I know for me, if it's something that doesn't really appeal to me, I'm not as interested in making it. So, but they're pretty basic, and they're very much build on the skills as you go along. So, I mean, there's a kimono robe. There's a whole section just on serging with sheer fabrics and delicate fabrics. And so, of course, there's a project to go with like that. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff in there. In fact, I'm still astounded that I actually got it all done, to be perfectly frank, because there's so much in there. It was a big, big undertaking.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I mean, there's like 600 or around 600 pictures alone. So, I mean, it's highly, highly illustrated. I mean, not only photos, but illustrations all along the way of every little thing.
Yeah, well, I think that's incredibly important because, like you said, if you have no idea what this vocabulary is, what's a looper, you need to see it, and you need to see it in action. There are a few people asking about types of sergers and what's good for a beginner. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. A lot of it depends on, it's like a roadmap of, where do you want to go with this? I think, for most people, for average, I mean, if you're only going to use that serger, or at least what you foresee, maybe you're mostly just going to be using it to do seam finishes. You don't plan on doing a lot of construction. You're not interested in using knits. A basic 2, 3, 4 thread serger is going to meet most people's needs the majority of the time. So, I mean, I would not recommend going lower than 4 threads. I think in this day and age, it's a little difficult to even find a serger that has less than 4 threads. But a 4-thread serger can do up to, well, actually more than 18 different stitches if you use the adjustments correctly. So it's amazing what you can do with it. That being said, being me, and I do knitwear, I do heavy duty stuff, I do a whole range of things with my serger. So that being said, for me, a 5-thread serger, either a 5-thread serger or a cover stitch machine, that's a whole different type of machine. Sometimes people will buy a cover stitch machine thinking it's a serger, but it's not. It only can do chain stitches and cover stitching, which is good for hemming, for doing some basting and simple seams with basting or hemming. So for me, of course, the absolute luxury is to have a 4-thread serger to do all the basic stuff, and then my 5-thread setup to do my specialty stitches or my hems and things. So it depends on what you're going to use for it. I think for a beginner starting out, get a good, decent, doesn't have to be super fancy 4-thread serger. And then as you get more proficient, if you're really spoiled rotten, then maybe you could add a 5-thread to your stable. Because, I mean, the ultimate luxury with sergers, it's even more so than sewing machines, because even with an air threading serger, they're not the most fun to change out your threads. So it's nice to be able to like have one with light colored thread and one with dark colored thread or whatever. But again, I'm spoiled rotten, so I realize this is not reality for everyone. But I love my 5-thread serger because I love to have, well, if I do a strip tease here, the serged blouse I have on underneath, I have that double row stitching. It looks very professional. So if you're doing a lot of knitwear, it's a nice thing to have. But yeah, it really just depends on where you want to go with it. But there's nothing. I mean, I serged with a basic 4-thread serger for years, and used a twin needle on my sewing machine to replicate the cover stitch look, and that was fine. I mean, these days, no, I don't want to go backward, but don't feel like. I mean, I know most of the sewing machine companies I work with are going to want to strangle me right now, but it's like it's okay. I mean, like right now, like so the machine. Can I say my machine? So my little FOF machine here is a basic air threading serger, and even though it's air threading, it still has manual tension discs and all that. So it's still like a really basic serger, but you have air threading. So like that's a great beginner machine. It's kind of nice because it's kind of medium point range, medium price range, but it's not super fancy computerized, does everything for you, but it's easy to thread. So, I love it. I've been using the heck out of it, even though I have fancier, bigger sergers. So I guess it's a very vague answer, but really a good 4-thread serger. you can do a lot.
Yeah, I must say I'm
Sorry.
very spoiled in the machine department as well. Very lucky and spoiled. I have two baby locks. One is just a 4 thread, and then this Triumph right here, which holds so many different threads. But as you can see right now, it only has 4 threads on it. So
Right.
I'm also looking forward to expanding my knowledge on what I can do with both of these sergers. Because, it's an investment just like anything else, and you want to get the most out of it. And I love
Absolutely.
the speed of the serger because I am a pedal to the metal kind of sewer, and that's my favorite part of it. When I was on the Marie Osmond show years ago, we actually kind of did a contest in the 3 minutes that I was on the air with her. She worked on a traditional Janome sewing machine, and I was on a serger, and I kept telling her, I'm going to beat you, and she was like, no, you're not. Well, she sewed straight seams. Mine were all finished, okay? Thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, but you still need to zigzag all those seam allowances. Okay, I digress. So let's talk a little bit more about the book, because I think this is a fascinating part about making a book. I come from the magazine world where everything is very fast, and you cycle through a magazine every literally 40 days to get the next one out. And so when you're working on a book, it is much more of a labor of love, if you will. Just, it has a lot more longevity as well. It's not a flash in the pan kind of magazine. So how long did this book take you from beginning to end?
Wow, longer than I thought it would. Well, really, it took about 9 months, maybe a little bit more, but that's working. I mean, last year while I was working on the book, I worked 7 days a week. In fact, I didn't have a single day off until Labor Day. So, I mean, I really started writing the book in like late November, early December, and so maybe it was more than 9. No, I was done by September. So, but it was really the writing was one thing actually. Well, one thing I didn't realize. Okay, so I've done a lot of magazine work with UL, and yes, I think it has been about 15 years. It's like, oh my God, it's like, and yes, we're still 21. It's amazing. But 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 yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that when you go to write a book, they tell you it's like, okay, this book is going to be this many pages long. It's going to have this much proportion of pictures to text. It's going to have, it's like they tell you all that in advance like this. And so it's like you have to take what you plan on saying and doing and somehow figure out how you're going to make it all fit. And you have to format it as you write. So you don't just write it. You have to write, it's like, okay, there should be a tip here. So then you better put your bracket in there saying, okay, tip, and then you write your little tip and then end tip. And you keep it's almost like designing a web page, and you're putting in all your hyperlinks as you go. I know that's not going to make a lot of sense to very many people, but at any rate, but you're like, oh, there should be a picture here. So you've got to put the picture, and it has to be the actual name of the actual file that picture's going to be. So then the photography is what took months and months, because not only because you have to, for a book, you have to have a photo sample for every photo. Now remember, there's over 500 photos in this book. That means over 500 different little samples that have to go with every single picture in the book. And you have to take a sample photograph of what the photo in the book should look like for the professional photographer to then reproduce in the studio. So you basically have to shoot the whole book yourself, and then they reproduce it. But because Sergers are very technical, that was something that was kind of unexpected, was they really couldn't replicate some of my photos. So they ended up just using mine instead. So that was kind of funny, because I certainly never expected to be getting photo credits in it, because I'm not a professional photographer. But I'm glad that I took the time. I really tried hard to light it all correctly and get good shots. And obviously they were, because they ended up using them instead. But it just goes to show, I mean, no wonder people can find Sergers kind of intimidating, because, I mean, it's just, they're not even easy to photograph. It's a very technical subject. But, I mean, as you know, I mean, once you get comfortable with it, then it's like, oh, I don't know what I was so worried about. But just to look at it. There's a lot of moving parts there. But yeah, the book process was, when you're used to doing magazine work, it was definitely like a big reality check in terms of it's a tremendous amount of work. I can't emphasize enough just how much work it is, and how many bolts of fabric I went through to create all of the step out samples for every single project and every step of every. I mean, like the kimono robe project or kimono style jacket. I mean, I mean bolts of fabric to create all of the sample photography samples. So it's
Yeah,
crazy.
I mean, it definitely shows how much work you put into the book. It's just, I'm going to give away one of the pages real quick. Hope that's okay. This
Oh yeah.
shows kind of some different looking cover stitches, which incidentally have been stabilized. The edges are stabilized, but look at these great photos you can see of the presser foot in there. That's the kind of instruction that we need. That's what we're looking at when we're sewing, So I just think you did a fantastic job with all the instructions and photography. So some people are asking, okay, where do I get the book? I want it. So you can get the book at sulky.com. I put the link in the description of the post today. So go ahead and grab that because you definitely need that as a resource in your sewing room. So let's get to some of these other questions. Katrina, this one I thought was a really good one from Lori. She says, my issue is where do I line up the fabric on the serger to get seam allowance without cutting too much? Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that question. It totally makes sense. I love that question. That's in chapter 3. No, actually, it's chapter 4. Yes, I love that question. That is so important. That's why it's chapter 4. What the most important thing is first you need to figure out, which you would know because you threaded your machine, which needle are you using? What's the leftmost needle? Your leftmost needle as you're looking at the machine, the one that's farthest from the cutting blade. That's what dictates your stitching line. Anything to the right of that is seam allowance. So get your little ruler out. If you want to be really, some sergers actually have markings on the serger, but I'll be darned if I can actually see them. Get yourself a piece of blue painter's tape and a ruler. Okay? Take that ruler, line it up to that needle, measure over from that needle the depth of your seam allowance. Put a piece of blue painter's tape on the side of your serger where the fabric meets up with your serger as it goes to the blade, and that will keep your seam allowances accurate. It's just you have to have a visual guide. Now, another trick to do is to actually remember you're usually serging right sides together, so this is on the wrong side of your fabric, is to actually take a seam allowance ruler and mark your stitching line on your fabric. If you look at the foot, at your serger foot, there are usually little bumps right in the front of that serger foot that align with each needle. And so once you line up, if you've literally drawn your stitching line on your fabric, line that up with the bump on your foot. That is the leftmost needle, and then you'll also have accurate seam allowances. So I'm so glad you asked that question. Yay. That is so important, and it's something that people it's like they just assume that the seam allowance magically adjusts itself to a 1/4 inch or whatever. And the thing is not every serger has a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance either. So it really is important to take the time to get your little ruler out and like, okay, what seam allowance am I really using here? Mm-hmm. But either of those two tricks will work.
Yeah, if you cut too much off, there's really no going back. You just got to recut the piece, and there you go.
Yeah, hope you don't have to grow it out. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know, a couple people chimed in, and I lost them on the feed, but they said that they purchased their first machines after a class with you. So they're FOF all the way.
Oh, that's funny.
That's great.
Well, it's good to see everybody.
Yeah. I'm so glad we have this and we can connect with people since, we're not able to go out and do these sewing shows and meet people face to face. So it's amazing that we get this opportunity. So I just put a comment up on the feed from Vera. She says, I want one of those new air thread sergers. And it just reminded me that we have a fantastic contest going on right now. I don't know if you're aware, Katrina, but we're going to be talking about it in the webinar today as well. It's our National Sewing Month contest. And we actually partnered with Husqvarna Viking of the Pfaff family of machines. And they are providing a one of the Amber Air S400 or 400S sergers. So if you don't have a serger yet, definitely, I mean, even if you do, you're going to want this one. So, is it right there?
Well, the Amber Air is, okay, it's exactly the same as my little Pfaff Admire. They're just different colors and have like a different name on it. But I mean, I can
look how lightweight it is. You could throw it over your shoulder.
It is really lightweight. Exactly. No, I have been surging the snot out of this little machine. So yes, the Amber Air is awesome. Like to do a rolled hem. What's really awesome is this little slider says normal and tight. So to do a rolled hem, if I'm already set up for a narrow 3-thread, I just go tight, pull back my stitch finger, and I do a rolled hem. Like rolled hem in 10 seconds.
Awesome.
It's freaking amazing. So yes, it looks like this.
Yeah, so you can win that as well as a bunch of sulky thread, sulky stabilizer, Sewist bundle. There's also a serger and rotary cutter from Havells and a fat quarter bundle from Cotton and Steel. So it's a really, really great prize package. And if you just go to sulky.com, it'll pop up, enter to win our sweepstakes. So be sure you take advantage of that. Okay, so many questions and comments, Katrina. I'm going to try to get a few others here. There's just so many I can hardly keep up with them. So this is a great topic. People are hungry for the serger education, so that's great.
Maybe I'll have to do Sergers Part 2 someday.
Exactly. We might just have to continue this series. Okay, so Marianne is asking, what is air threading? What does that mean?
Oh, another excellent question. So air threading sergers have been around since the 1800s, believe it or not. Then they came to the home market in the 1960s. So air threading is the most recent development. And it's something that the Baby Lock originally had the patent for in the United States. And now I think basically every major brand of sewing machine now has an air threading serger because the patent expired. So what air threading does is, the most challenging part for most people to thread a serger is the loopers. So there's the upper and looper, because the serger kind of knits the seam together. I mean, there's needles, of course, but there's loopers that kind of knit along the edge, and that's the overcasting part of the serger seam. So those loopers are kind of challenging. There's all these little moving parts and things. The air threader allows you to push the thread into a little air port, and usually you lift a lever or push a button, and it literally blows the thread through the loopers. So it's pretty awesome. Now, if you were going to say thread your machine with delane in the loopers, you would probably want to go ahead and thread it use the air threaders to thread your regular thread, and then you tie your fillet on and pull it through. So there's different variations, but the air threading makes it so fast and easy. So sorry, Baby Lock. I'm sorry that everybody else is coming up with air threading. But they're great. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It does make threading easier. That being said, the majority of my sergers are traditional, and I thread them the old-fashioned way. So It's not a big deal.
Yep. But grab your tweezers. Don't lose those.
Yeah. Yes, get your tweezers. It's nice. But no, air threading is just basically they use air to force the thread through the threading path rather than you doing it manually.
Yeah, it's such a great invention. Okay. Sorry, Did I mention I was only 21? How could my eyes be going bad? When the comments come up, they're very small, so I have to get a little closer.
Sure.
A lot of people saying they're ordering the book. They're super excited to get more out of their serger. Someone just said, I don't know what brand I have because it's still in the box. So this is a great opportunity to get your serger out of the box and learn how to use it.
Well, and she shouldn't feel bad because, whenever the subject of sergers comes up, I swear there's like 3 or 4 different responses. And that's almost the first one is, I have a serger and it's still in the box. I have a serger, but I don't know how to thread it. I have a serger, but the thread broke and now I don't know how to thread it. It's like, those are kind of the top 3 responses. So she's a good company. No shame, no shame. All the more reason to take a class, read the book, etc. I'm actually just finished filming the first part of a very extensive video series to go with the book, a video companion. So pretty excited to get that launched as well.
Okay.
For people who want a little bit more detail.
Sorry, this is a little bit more of a complex question. I'm trying to, a lot of you have questions that we are going to cover at 2:00 in the webinar. For example, what is the difference between a cover stitch and a serger? We will be going in depth a little while later on the webinar, so be sure to register for the webinar. The link to register is in the description of today's post. Also, the link to the book is in the description of today's post, and I'm noticing that we're putting the link on in the comments as well, so you can find it easier. So I'm trying to sift through some of these that we will be covering a little bit later. Can you talk about the importance of getting your serger from a dealer so that you do get some more education and things along with your investment?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, usually if someone, yes, I mean, sergers being a complex machine with a lot of moving parts, you really should buy one from a reputable sewing machine dealer. And if you're not sure where your local dealer is, a lot of people just have no idea if they're new to sewing that there even is such thing as sewing machine dealerships. You can go to pretty much any sewing machine company website and they'll have a dealer locator for you. And, having a good dealer is really, sorry, Viking and Fox, but it's really as important as, or more important than the actual brand you're using. And that's coming from someone who works with certain companies. So, because a dealer is there, and most reputable dealers, they have knowledgeable staff. Most of them will offer classes, especially if you bought the machine there. They'll usually offer some user classes to help you learn to use it. Service, if something goes wrong. When I was working on this book, I actually blew up a serger. I was running it so hard, and the AC wasn't keeping. It was over 100 degrees. The AC wasn't keeping up because I just had a little AC in at my studio. The machine got overheated, and it actually blew up my serger. Most people are going to have that problem. They don't run them like I do, but they're not working on a book. So, the fact that I had a good dealer who I could get that machine to, and they knew what the situation was, they got it right back to me. That is priceless. And the problem with the sergers that are sold by the box stores and things generally is just that, they're cheap. Okay, that's kind of the bottom line. They're very inexpensive, and they just don't perform well in general. They're not as precise. They don't hold up. Sergers, again, they move very fast. It's important that they be well built because those parts are moving so quickly, and they're moving so much fabric that there's a lot of vibration, etc. And you want something that's going to be quality and have a dealer that's going to stand up behind it and, honor that warranty and everything. So yeah, super important. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Anytime you can get any extra assistance and, like you said, updates and things like that you wouldn't normally even know about, take advantage. Take advantage for sure. Colleen says, Katrina is a great teacher. I helped her pack an old previous loved machine in her luggage after class one time, hoping she can teach here in Florida again. Maybe you remember Colleen.
Yes, of course I do. As soon as she said that, like, oh, I know who that is. Yes, that was done. Oh my gosh, yes, they had a vintage blind hemming machine, which of course I didn't have. The thing must weigh 40 pounds. So I was just like, is that a blind hammer? She's like, yeah. I'm like, how much? And again, I'm just like there overnight, and I was there to help teach and train on a 10 needle multi-needle embroidery machine. So totally different subject, but yes, yes. And it got home in my luggage just fine. Life is good, but yes. So yes, that's awesome. And thank you, Colleen. That's so kind of you. I love the sewing world. The sewing world, we are all one big, big familyhood,
Yep, we're all in
of
this
wonderful
together.
people, truly, for sure.
Okay, some people are asking about the comment you made earlier about tying heavier threads onto your lighter weight threads to get them through the air threading system. Someone asked if we were going to talk about that in the webinar, and that's not in the webinar, so maybe you can speak about that a little bit more here.
Sure thing. One of the great things about Sergers is that those loopers, there's two basic components. There's your needles and your loopers. And your needles, you're pretty much stuck with, the threads that you can get through up to a size 90 needle. But in the loopers, the holes are larger, and so you can run all kinds of interesting threads to the loopers, including filane, which does really cool stuff. And because it looks like yarn. So it's great for doing like mock blanket stitch and things. So it's really difficult to thread, like actually go through the motions, thread those kinds of specialty threads. So instead, what you do is you take your thread, so thread it with normal serger thread, and then you tie the new one onto it with just what we basically take both threads together, make a loop and pull the tails through. And then make sure, of course, your tension discs are open, and just gently pull that thread, the looper thread, through your machine and thread it that way. And that's actually the fastest, even with an air threading serger like this little one next to me. If I need to change out my looper threads, I don't bother cutting my threads and then blowing the new looper thread through. I tie on my new color and pull it through, because even with air threading, it's faster to do it that way. And I've known industry professionals who couldn't remember how to thread their serger because they always just pull it through. So, I won't tell you who they are. But I know it's a fact. So that's anytime you have a thread that might be challenging to thread through your loopers, you can, if it's been already threaded, or you can thread it with regular thread, tie it on and pull it through. It's much faster.
Mm-hmm. And all this talk about filane, I do want to mention that even though you can use this in the loopers, it makes a really nice fuzzy kind of edge for, let's say, a fleece blanket, something like that, a scarf, decorative edges with a little bit of texture. We are using it today for machine embroidery. And I'm just going to show you a little bit here. I'm going to take you off the screen, Katrina, but you're still with us. I'm going to show you all a little bit of the designs that are available in the pollen collection that we are featuring today. So today, like I showed you earlier, for those who missed, I will show you what we will be working on in this afternoon's webinar. It is this great market tote that Katrina came up with, and all of the construction is done on the serger. There's a little bit of finishing on your regular sewing machine, and you can also make it without a serger. So if you don't have a serger, join us anyway, because you will still learn how to make the tote on a conventional sewing machine. The great thing about this is it's might look like a basic tote bag, but it has great structure to it due to the fact that Katrina is using Sulky Fuse and Stitch as the interfacing as well as the machine embroidery stabilizer. So you're getting a 2-in-1 with that Fuse and Stitch. Fuse and Stitch is a heavier weight stabilizer that, like the name suggests, is fusible, and it remains with your fabric throughout washing and wearing and all that good stuff. That is our giveaway today for those of you liking, sharing, commenting, engaging with the post. I'll be picking a winner tomorrow afternoon for the Fuse and Stitch. But what's really great about it in this case, Like I said, you're getting a 2-in-1 out of it. But this fabric, even though it looks like a heavyweight denim, it's actually a cotton fabric that is lighter weight, that is just the color of denim. So you have this turquoise wash and then the traditional kind of denim color fabric, but we're making it heavier weight with the addition of that fusion stitch. So this is a lesson on how to basically embroider a design with a high stitch count on a lighter weight fabric, which can sometimes be problematic. If the fabric doesn't have enough thread count to support all of those stitches, then you're going to have problems. So the addition of that fusion stitch with a lighter weight fabric is really, really necessary. So let's go over the designs a little bit because they're so unique. I've never seen anything like these before. I commissioned these from Sue Penn Designs. She's a great fabric designer, and she and I just kind of worked up the idea for this collection that the filaine would be used for the pollen of all of those flowers. So that was showing, let's see, the Gerbera daisy and the Cosmo, okay? And Katrina kind of paired those together on the one side of the tote. And I have a sample. Here is that Cosmo that I can show you maybe a little bit more up close, where you can really, really see the texture of the pollen there on that flower. And it's just a really, really neat effect. And it pops out at you. It's like a 3D effect. And I'm totally gushing about it, but I just think anytime we could do something new and a brand new fun technique, I'm all about it. So I also have the picture of the dandelion up here, which is a design that comes with the market tote for today. And I showed how to brush that out just for those of you who might have missed it. And some of you have asked in the comments about brushing it out. How do we know if we've gone too far, right? So if the thread, if you brush it too aggressively, the thread loops can kind of loosen a little bit, okay? So you really just want to be careful with your wire brush. I have not had a situation where my brush has snagged the thread, but I also don't go in a bunch of circles when I'm brushing it out. I kind of go with the flow of the direction of the thread. You can also go against it, but not vigorous circles, that type of thing. So here you can see all the fuzzy little dandelion fluffs, and it's so pretty. I also wanted to show you some of the designs that are not featured on the tote that you also will get your files for when you get the Pollen Slimline collection. So this is the poppy, and I stitched it out on cork fabric. So super duper heavyweight, and I've got tons of rayon thread in here, and of course the filaine. And some of you have asked about the needles to use for this. We do need a larger needle, but we don't want the needle so fat that it's going to cause excess needle holes, right? So for this, for the cork, I used a 9014 titanium needle. The titanium needle is super duper strong, so it's going to go through all these layers in addition to all of the underlay that happens with these heavy stitch count designs. Now, for other items, I recommend a 116 needle for the filaine. Now, when you're working on a design that has rayon thread as well as filaine thread, you need to be conscious of when you are switching to filaine thread in your machine, you also need to switch out your needle because you don't need the same size needle as you do with rayon, right? We don't want a hole in the needle that is too big for the thread because it gives it too much room to groove on its way to the stitching path. So hopefully I explained that right, Katrina. You can correct me because you have been using it just as long as I have.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, fantastic. All right, some of the other flower designs that you get with the Pollen Slimline. This is the Calla Lily. And I want to show you this really, really up close because the only part that is filaine, can you see that? Is that little center pollen area. I know it has a specific name, and I studied it well in the creation of these designs, and now it's escaping me, but that part of the flower you can see is the only textured kind of 3D fuzzy part of that design. And then we also have a hibiscus flower. So for those of you needing the Hawaii vibe right now, here's the hibiscus, and you can see the only fuzzy part is the center of that flower. And the rest is really, really pretty layers of rayon thread that are shaded across the petals. You can see this petal alone has, I think, 3 or 4 different pinks in it to provide that shading. And I think they're just really, really pretty designs. So let me just give a little more of my show and tell here before this one's cool. So in Katrina's tote, I must say on my Gerbera Daisy sample here, I brushed the heck out of that center. Do you see that? It's super furry. And on Katrina's tote, it's only brushed very slightly. Let me show you here. So you have a choice. How furry do you want it to be? I'm just sitting here like petting it because it's just so neat. You have the choice of how much you want to brush it out. All right, and then the little, Cosmo that we have here as well. So that is the one I did, and you can see it sort of compared to the one Katrina did over here. Mine is brushed quite a bit, so you have that choice when creating your tote. Okay, and as I suspected, Katrina, lots more questions coming in. Maybe we have another about 5 minutes, so let's see. Oh, this is a question about fuse and stitch. She calls it fuse and stable, but it's fuse and stitch. Roxy says, so are all your samples backed with fuse and stitch? Actually, only some of them are, because I was experimenting with stabilization as well as experimenting with the stitch outs to make sure that, you know, they were all good and ready to go for everyone. So for the cork sample, I actually used 2 sheets of Tear Easy, and you can see it tore away completely from the wrong side. So that one I did not use fuse and stitch, but also I didn't really want a fusible stabilizer on the cork. The cork is already very heavyweight, and adding that fuse and stitch is going to make it so that I probably can't create really nice smooth corners and things like that. It would just make it too stable almost. So this one has the fuse and stitch on it. And you can see it is staying with the project. And I created a larger rectangle for this sample because I'm going to turn it into something else. So always do a test stitch out with your stabilizer, fabric, and thread combination and needle that you plan to use for your finished project. Now, it's a little, I don't know what the right word is. What is it, Katrina? Annoying that you have to do a test stitch out on a design that has over 40,000 stitches. But if the design works out with that combination, then you have a sample that you can go turn into a little zipper pouch. So I always cut my sample fabric larger than I need it for the design so that I have room to create something out of it if it is successful. So that's my little tip about that.
Totally.
All right, let's bring Katrina back on the screen here. Okay. Oh, Tony has another question. What fabric did you use for the Calla Lily? So all of these are Kona cotton, except for the cork that I showed you. Okay. Lots of people saying they cannot wait to learn more about serger functions, so that's great. Be sure to register for our 2 o'clock webinar. Lots of people get confused and they think this is the webinar, but the actual webinar is at 2 o'clock. So if you have only experienced our Facebook Lives, you are in for a treat for the webinar. It's basically like taking a class from Katrina out in the world pre-COVID, okay? because she's going to go in depth for everything we've talked about today. The basics of using your serger, as well as how to create this market tote and how to work with the filaine thread. Okay. Okay. Oh, a lot of people gave me the name for the Calla Lily, the Calla Lily pollen portion. Okay. June wants to know, can you use variegated threads on them? I'm not sure if she means on the serger or in these designs. We do have sulky blendables, and they come in 12 weight and 30 weight. So it's important to note the filaine is a 12 weight thread. So if your design is not digitized for a 12 weight thread, it is not going to work with this thread. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Katrina, because you have worked with this thread a lot too.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. It's a 12 weight thread. And so if you've ever worked with the sulky blendables and 12 weight or what have you, basically the same kind of things you need to look for. You need to make sure that your stitches themselves aren't too short. You want longer stitches. You want them slightly spaced a little bit, a little farther from each other. In other words, your embroidery density needs to be lighter. You need to make sure that whatever you're stitching into, has the ability to absorb, so to speak, those bigger diameter threads. Basically, if you're familiar with working with the heavy cottons, it's basically the same. So I mean, when I'm choosing an embroidery design for a project for Ellen, I'm mostly looking if it's something that has more of a hand sewing look to it, or like this pollen, the way the pollen itself has been digitized, they're fairly large stitches and they're not super dense. So because the digitizer was aware of what kind of thread was being used. So, but if it's a running stitch design or cross stitch, something that has a lot of openness to it, it should work fine.
Yeah, and we will be giving out a ton more tips for working with the filaine because, like I said, it is a tricky thread and you have to make some adjustments. Not only do you need to switch out your needle to a larger needle to accommodate the 12 weight thread, but you also need to set up your machine a little bit differently. And slowing down your machine is very important as well. It's just less friction, less tension happening during the stitch out. So, and like I said, on a design that it has a ton of stitches in it, slowing it down really does make it take quite a while. But I don't know, I get hypnotized by the embroidery machine. A lot of the times I'm like just staring at it. It's amazing what they can do without you even in the room.
It is. I never get to, I find myself, like you said, getting sucked in and I like a zombie. I'm just standing there just watching after all these years.
I know, it's great. Okay, lots of people wondering if they can watch the webinar later. Yes, you definitely can. We will be going live with the webinar at 2 p.m. and you need to register to be involved. So take advantage of the registration link that is in the description for today's post. We will be talking about sergers with Katrina Walker. We will also be going over embroidery with filaine thread, and we will be making this wonderful market tote. I will bring it up again. And most importantly, grab yourself the market tote kit. Grab yourself the pollen slimline so you have all the threads and you can choose from all 6 of those beautiful floral designs if you have that pollen slimline. And then, of course, Katrina's book, Katrina's great book, Serger 101. Grab that up all at sulky.com. And the day of the webinar, for those of you who frequent our webinars, you already know this, but the day of the webinar, we have fantastic deals on all of these products. So get it while you can. The deals are only available for 24 hours the day of the webinar. So take advantage of all of that great stuff. And Katrina, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, I learned a few new things, so I appreciate you joining, and I'm excited to learn some more this afternoon.
Absolutely. 11 a.m. Pacific.
Yeah, we're into it.
If you're
All
on
right.
Pacific time, don't show up at 2.
Exactly. 2 p.m. Eastern time. Eastern time. So set your clocks how you need to adjust for that. All right. Thanks so much, Katrina.
Thank you. See
And
you later.
thank you all for joining. Again, our giveaway today is a pack of Fuse and Stitch Stabilizer, which is a great stabilizer for machine embroidery, as well as interfacing for projects like our market tote that we were talking about. So for all of you liking, sharing, and commenting on today's post, you are automatically eligible to win a pack of Fuse and Stitch, and I will be posting the winner tomorrow afternoon. So thanks so much for joining me today on So What, our Facebook Live series, and I will see you at 2 p.m. See you at 2 p.m. for our webinar with Katrina. Take care, and I'll see you next time.